Hi, friends. Since I had quite a few people in this class who were having some trouble with the argument breakdown worksheet, I wanted to go over, some of the ways that you might approach this to help you understand how to do this process. The reason I'm doing that is that this is going to come up in Unit 4 as well. So I want to make sure that you have the skills and the strategies to be able to do what we were doing in this assignment. Okay. So let me get set up here. I can close that. There we go. Okay. So let me bring over, here we go, right here. Okay, so here's the argument breakdown worksheet that we're working on. I created a new copy here. Now, most people did okay with the APA reference list. That wasn't a place where I was taking off points. So let's look at how it should look. There were a couple little things that some people forgot to do, whatever. One thing I would do is include her middle initial here. So if you didn't do that, you would include that. One thing that a lot of people tend to forget, because it's just kind of a weird APA convention, I guess, is that when we write article titles on the reference list, we use sentence style capitalization, which means we capitalize the first word. If there's like a period or colon in the middle, we would capitalize the first word after that. We don't capitalize anything else unless it would be like a proper noun, like somebody's name or something like that, something that would always be capitalized. So this is how your article title should look. The other thing is here we are not italicizing this article title because the source is a magazine. So there's this weird APA rule, and this is where I have to say I don't make the rules, I just teach them, where if it's a source that has a print equivalent, meaning it's something that, like if you went to Barnes & Noble, you might see it on the shelf like of magazines there, the display. So magazines, newspapers, academic journals that are offered in print as well as online. If the source is something that has a print equivalent, which U.S. News and World Report does, then what we do is we leave the article title, the first title is unitalicized. The publication title will be italicized. Okay. Now, if you're not sure if it's a source that has a print equivalent, sometimes you can Google it and get a feel for whether it's like a magazine or newspaper or just a website. Yeah, website. If you're not sure, there's ways to figure it out. Honestly, this is one of those things that if you get this mixed up, I don't think anyone's going to give you too hard a time about it, but just in case, that's the rule, all right? I might be the only one who gives you a hard time about it, and I don't even give you that hard a time about it. I would just remind you. All right, so no italics here and sentence style capitalization. Here's the publication title. We do italicize that one, and we capitalize all the major words, kind of like you're used to with titles. Sometimes I have students who will say, yeah, but on the article, these are all capitalized. That doesn't really matter. All right, when you're putting on the reference list, we follow this convention. And then we would follow that with the URL, which it's just easy to copy and paste that from the article if you have the article open up in your browser. Okay, so again, not too many people had problems with that except for some of these kind of weird APA things over here. All right, let's get to where some people were having a few issues. And let me tell you some strategies to go through it, okay? So the author's claim. So some of the things I want you to remember about the author's claim. First of all, you want to state it in one sentence. So let me find our slideshow over here. Okay, so here's what we had on the slideshow. Oh, there we go. It's a controlling idea for the entire article, and we want to state it in one sentence, right? The other thing you want to be able to do is state it in your own words, because if you state it in your own words, that shows that you understood versus that you're just copying a sentence out of the article, okay? We also want to avoid just repeating the title as our main idea. Even though it might be the main idea, you want to show me that you can state it in your own words, okay? So we want to avoid stating the title as our main idea. We want to avoid just plucking a sentence out of the article as our main idea. And you also want to make sure you're writing a main idea sentence that covers the entire article, right? So sometimes what people were doing with this one was stating that the author's main idea is that social media is bad for you, which yes, she definitely talks about that quite a bit in her article, but there's a little bit more to it than just that. So sometimes people were writing a main idea sentence that just talked about that part of it. Or some people were writing main idea sentences that were maybe 3 sentences and went into a little bit more detail than a main idea sentence should. So let's look at some of these strategies and then I'll show you how to do it. First of all, it's going to be very hard to write a main idea sentence in your own words if you haven't actively read and annotated the entire article. All right. We are going to look at the title, but we're not going to use the title as our main idea sentence. We're going to look for repeated words and concepts through the whole article and kind of ask ourselves, why does it matter? All right, so let's go back to the article here. Sorry about my clock in the background there. All right, so here's our article. Okay, so social media is a public health crisis. So if you wrote a main idea sentence that says like social media is bad for our mental health, you definitely have part of the main idea. But remember, we want to make sure we're covering her whole article. The other thing is, if she's writing a persuasive article here, most reasonable people are not going to argue with the fact that social media is bad for our mental health. I think a lot of us know that if somebody's overusing social media and like doom scrolling and unable to limit their time on it, that's not really the healthiest behavior, right? There are some benefits of social media to mental health. I've had people say that, but there is this kind of behavior that is not necessarily positive mental health behavior, all right? So I don't think a lot of people would argue with that, but think about the other part of her title here. Let's treat it like one. So what is she saying here? If you read through the whole article, she's saying that we need more regulations from the government to address this problem. And I think that's where people might disagree with her. That's where she's really making an argument that people might disagree with. And that should be part of your statement of her main idea. All right. So that's one way we can look at the main idea. What is the title saying and really dig deep? Now, that's not the only way to do it. All right. Sometimes titles aren't going to give us that much information. We also have this little, it's not really a subtitle, but just this little, I don't even know what we would call that. I'm sure there's a word for it. It's time to take old approaches to a new threat of addiction. So again, here's this idea of it's bad for us. Here's what we should do about it. So she's hinting at something here, okay? The other thing that you want to look for is what's being repeated throughout the whole article. So obviously social media is going to be repeated throughout the whole article. So if we started a list, let's see where I could do this. Maybe just right, maybe under the URL here. So sometimes what I do, if I have to write a sentence in my own words, I'm going to list some of the repeated concepts. I don't really want that line there. Is it going to work for me? Whatever. All right, so we have social media. She keeps repeating quite a bit. And it might not be that word or that phrase. It might be synonyms, or it might be examples. So when she mentions Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, those are examples of social media. So that's repeating the concept. Let me see if there's any place else. I think she says, like social media comes up quite a bit, obviously. Digital, like any reference to technology, that would also be repeating this idea of social media. Social media, social media, social media, right, that's coming up a lot. All right, so obviously that's one of her repeated ideas. Something else that comes up quite a bit is this negative impact. So we have red flags, negative mental health impacts, depression. So negative mental health impacts is kind of the repeated concept. She might give examples like depression, negative impact on mental health, public health crisis, threat to public health, anxiety, depression, or loneliness. So I think you agree with me that if we go through, and if we go all the way down to the end of the article, serious health implications, prioritize mental health. So that's something that's repeated. Addiction, not healthy behavior. So that's repeated. I mean, I think you agree with me, right? That negative effects on mental health is something that's repeated quite a bit throughout the article. And as I said, a lot of people had this as their main idea sentence, but remember that there's another part to her argument here, and we're also going to see this repeated in pretty much every section. Note that we have these lines here that are chunking the article for us. So let's see what's repeated there. Public health. We need to start treating these platforms like we do cigarettes and alcohol, warning labels, age restrictions, and better research. So this concept is specifically warning labels and age restrictions is saying that we need to have government regulation of social media. She's not saying that, she's kind of giving examples here, but if you think about the general idea that she's saying by talking about warning labels and age restrictions, government involvement, regulations, etc. Okay, and let's see if that's repeated. Spoiler alert, it will be. Consider more. Okay. So I think right in here, okay, in this paragraph, it's a lot like smokers and their cigarettes. We should treat it that way, right? So how do we treat cigarettes? Because they're harmful to smokers, warning labels, and government regulation. Digital detox on a society-wide scale. So she's basically saying that, again, society, everybody has to be involved in this. So again, that's that sort of government regulation. Let me see. All right, time to consider government regulations. More must be done to lessen the negative impacts on social media on both an individual and societal level, right? So society, that would be government regulations. Research has shown this is not healthy behavior. I think here we go. Limits, standards, and regulation are needed. See how she keeps coming back to that idea? Time we started treating social media for what it is. Okay, so that idea of we need to have this government involvement, government regulations, that's another big part of her argument. So some people miss that, and it's going to be an important thing that we look at as we move forward. So then what I would do is I would have this list. Now, the other thing I try to do, remember that when you're putting something in your own words, we're not only going to put in synonyms, but part of the process is usually using synonyms. Now, social media, there's not really another, that's a very particular phrase, and there's not really another general way to say that. And in our main idea, we want to stay fairly general. So even though there's specific examples we could give, that wouldn't work in our main idea because her whole article is not about Instagram. Her whole article is about social media in general. Okay, so I'm probably going to have to keep that one. Negative effects on mental health. I'm going to break that down into two ideas. So negative effects, we could say harmful. We could say damaging. So I'm just brainstorming here. Destructive. I don't like that, but when we brainstorm, we just kind of get ideas down. Destructive, harmful. We could try to find synonyms this way. Detrimental, I don't have. Negative, unhealthy. Now, when we do look at synonyms like this, just be aware that some of these words, like I probably would not use pernicious. I probably would not use noxious. I probably wouldn't use malefic. All right, so I'm still going to use kind of words that make sense in this context. Damaging, I have detrimental, negative, hurtful. All right, so I have a couple options there, and I'm going to explain why I do that. All right, mental health, other ways we could say that. Psychological. Oops, it would be nice if your English teacher could spell, right? I can spell, I just can't type very well. Psychological. We could put emotional. I think she kind of talks about other stuff besides that, but just brainstorming. Psychological, emotional. And then government involvement regulations. Let's see if we can find something else besides regulations. Define, let's see, rules, laws, mandates. I don't know if any of these are really fitting, so I might keep regulations. Yeah, I don't really love any of those for the context that we're looking at here, all right? So Maybe government involvement, we might be able to keep that. All right, so then I'm going to see which one of these words I want to use. Psychological. Let me see if there's another word for health that works. I know there's another word for health, but let's see if there's one that works in this. Psychological well-being, maybe? That works. Okay. And then detrimental, I think I liked. Okay. So now I have these 4 general ideas that we know are ideas that she talks about through her whole article. So now I'm going to take these 4 ideas and write my own sentence. I do not have to go in the order in which they are on this list, right? I can kind of jump around, jump up, and get down. So let's see how we're going to do this. And it might also help, sometimes it helps people to start with argues that. So what if I start at the end? Government involvement is necessary to address the detrimental effects of social media on people's psychological well-being. Oops, bing. Oh, so close. There we go. All right. Now, I never ever want to say, like, look how easy it is. Look how quickly I did that. What I want you to notice is the process, all right? Where I really looked through the whole article, what was being repeated a lot. I listed those repeated concepts. I looked for some synonyms, but that wasn't the only thing I did. I chose synonyms that really worked in the context, you know, not some like random crazy word like maleficent or pernicious, but like, you know, detrimental. And then I used those words and wrote my own sentence. Okay? So hopefully that helps you with writing your main idea sentence. I'm going to stop this lesson here and go on to the major details in another lesson. All right? Let me know if you have any questions, as always. All right?